there. My name is Michelle Willows, and I'm the environmental planner for the Lakehead Region Conservation Authority. Thank you for joining me today to learn more about invasive Phragmites identification in Northern Ontario. Here's a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. So what is invasive Phragmites, how to identify invasive Phragmites, the Thunder Bay Regional Phragmites collaboration and what we're working on, the regional distribution, and how you can help us track its spread. Invasive Phragmites is arguably Ontario's worst invasive plant. It's a perennial grass that has been damaging ecosystems and wetlands in Ontario for decades. Invasive Phragmites grows aggressively and spreads quickly, outcompeting native species for water and nutrients. Phragmites also has the ability to release toxins from its roots into the soil to hinder the growth of other species and kill surrounding plants. While it prefers areas of standing water, its roots can grow to extreme lengths. A feature called the stolons can reach meters long, allowing it to survive in relatively dry areas. Some of the negative impacts of invasive Phragmites is that it crowds out native vegetation, resulting in decreased plant biodiversity. It generally provides poor habitat and food supplies for wildlife, including several species at risk. It grows very quickly, thereby causing the water table to lower, disrupting wetland processes as the water is transpired faster than it would be with native vegetation. It increases fire hazards as the stands are composed of a high percentage of dead stalks. And it can also affect agriculture, cause road safety hazards, and impact our favorite recreational activities such as swimming, boating, and angling. There are actually two species of Phragmites in Ontario, one of which is invasive and the other is native. Believe it or not, we actually have an abundance of native Phragmites in our region, so it's important to understand ID characteristics between the two of them from when you are planning any management or removal of stands. So invasive Phragmites grows very densely. It can grow up to 15 feet tall. The stem is often a light green to beige color, and the stalks often persist throughout the winter. The leaves are a bluey green color, and where they attach to the stem, also known as the ligule, you can often see these hairy fibers coming off. That's a great ID feature for invasive Phragmites. The seed heads are also fluffy and densely populated with seeds. Whereas native Phragmites grows in lower densities and often can coexist with other species. The stems are smooth and thin with a red coloring towards the base. The leaves are often a greeny blue or a greeny yellow color, almost like a lime green in comparison to invasive Phragmites, which is again that blue-green. And these leaves typically fall off in the fall. The seed heads are also much more sparse than invasive Phragmites. Here are some great examples of those identification characteristics. On the left, you can see invasive Phragmites, where the color of the stem and leaf blade is a bluey green color, and it has those hair-like fibers on the ligules. When comparing the leaves, you can see native Phragmites has a considerably thinner leaf and is more of a yellow-green color, whereas invasive Phragmites has a wider leaf with a bluey green color. The seed heads can also be really telling. However, with a shorter growing season in Northern Ontario, they can appear smaller in size. So it's good to rely on all identification features and not just one. So let's put these ID features to practice. We're going to do a couple quizzes. On the left, we have a large, fluffy seed head, and on the right, we have a smaller seed head. Which one do you think is invasive? If you guessed left, you'd be correct. Here we have two different stem colors. On the left, we have a red and beige striped stem. On the right, we have an all beige stem with no color variation. Which one is invasive? If you guessed right, you'd be correct. This stand is a bit trickier to tell. It's tall and has seemingly fluffy seed heads. However, the leaves are a yellow-green color. This stand in particular has stumped us because it has similar characteristics to invasive Phragmites, so we decided to DNA test the stand. The results actually came back as native. You may have even passed this stand as it's located on Highway 61 and reported often. Here we have another example where on the left we have a stand growing in a grassy area with fluffy seed heads, beige stems, and on the right we have Phragmites growing in standing water with red candy cane coloration on the stem. Which one is invasive? If you guessed left, you'd be correct. Invasive Phragmites can survive in even the harshest of environments, where native Phragmites tends to prefer to grow in standing water. Here we see a large, dense stand of Phragmites. It's growing in shallow water, and we can see some red coloration on the stem. Which species do you think it is, native or invasive? If you guess native, you are correct. It's important to consider all ID characteristics because, as you can see, they can get a little bit confusing because they all grow in different ways. It's also important not to confuse identification with other species. I remember in my first year of invasive Phragmites identification, it was trickier in the early growing season not to confuse it with reed canary grass and meadow foxtail. However, the stems, the plant parts, they are all really telling later in the season. So it's just important to be mindful not to confuse them with these two other species. So the LRCA started the Thunder Bay Regional Phragmites collaboration in 2022, and I'm excited to share that we have 37 members now. We have been mapping, prioritizing management, and monitoring invasive Phragmites stands in the Thunder Bay region. And in 2026, we'll be expanding our survey range west to Atikokan and east to Nipigon. When we first started out, we used programs such as EdMaps and iNaturalist to try to target where these stands were, try to relocate them so that we could map them and get them treated. So thank you to all the community members who participate in reporting invasive species on these platforms. To date, the LRCA has monitored and managed 36 stands, which will be revisited in 2026 to be reassessed for growth. Take note of these clusters of invasive Phragmites. You'll see that they're along the more industrial corridors of the Thunder Bay region. Specifically, the vectors of spread are major roadways, rail lines, and harbor ports. We were fortunate to collaborate with some birders on the identification of these stands. So they were located near Marina Park Drive, where people who are looking for rare species of birds actually found and ID'd these invasive Phragmites stands. So we've been working with CN and CP Rail to remove these stands and have them treated. And we're so grateful for that partnership because it's really important to prevent the spread along these corridors. Further, millions of dollars are being put into the Trans-Canada Highway twinning in and around Thunder Bay. Something that will be great for safety and access, but will also increase access for invasive Phragmites that will hitch a ride on machinery and transports. So monitoring along the highway will be important for catching invasive Phragmites at its onset and early establishment to prevent its continued spread. Further, where we have these transportation vectors, so here we have Kiefer Terminal and near Manitoulin Transport, where we found invasive Phragmites stands growing amongst poplar forest, which is quite unusual. Our main concern for this area is keeping invasive Phragmites out of the Neabie-McIntyre floodway to ensure that it doesn't impact its function. So there are challenges in the north when it comes to invasive Phragmites ID, but we are lucky to have a manageable number of identified stands. But we do have those unique challenges. So one of Thunder Bay's best qualities is that it's so vast and wild, and there's lots to explore, and it's lesser traveled. However, that does make it harder to know the limits of invasive Phragmites spread. Further, our window for herbicide application is shortened in Northern Ontario as our climate and our ability to treat invasive Phragmites ends in early October, where in Southern Ontario, they have a much longer extended growing season that goes to the end of October. Our growing season can also make it a little bit more challenging to get DNA samples earlier in the season, as it's only the end of June now, and Phragmites is only perhaps a couple feet tall. It's hard to get those early samples in to establish a treatment plan for later in the fall. And lastly, what we've already alluded to is we have a lot of native Phragmites in town. So it's really important to be making sure that your identification is correct, and that if you're not sure, that you're getting it ID'd through a DNA test and looking at all those features that we discussed today. But with your help, we are sure to continue to succeed. If you see Phragmites, whether you're working directly with it or a citizen looking to help us locate, map, and manage Phragmites, you can use iNaturalist as a tool. This tool is fabulous for assisting us in our goal of becoming frag-free by 2033, as you can load all your observations to this platform. Not only is it good for tracking invasive species, but it's fun to kind of report and track all the different species that you encounter as you're camping and hiking. It really is a great tool, and if you haven't checked it out, I highly suggest getting an account today. Thank you again for joining me to learn more about the identification techniques of invasive Phragmites. And I can't thank you enough for helping us and again, achieving our goal to be frag-free by 2033. Thank you to our funders, the Invasive Species Center and the MNRF, for the funding towards this project and all that you have done for preventing Phragmites spread in Northern Ontario.